All right, so we are live. Thank you for joining us, Jill. I wanted to preface this by saying that I promised Jill I'd get her out of here by 3:30. So as we're talking, please post your comments and/or questions, and we'll be sure to get to them when we get to the Q&A. Um, Wanted to just let them know that you and I had a conversation a couple of days, Jill, and I was kind of letting you know what we do here at Creating Coding Careers. We have an apprenticeship program where we're training people to become either software engineers, ServiceNow engineers. We have a lot of people who've already taken a CSA. They're looking for jobs. We have a lot of people that are looking for developer jobs. We also have a pre-apprenticeship program that where people also are studying the fundamentals of ServiceNow. And I let everybody know you're going to be joining us to kind of walk us through what that was like for you getting into the ServiceNow ecosystem. You come from a non-tech background. You jumped into ServiceNow, got your CSA, decided, hey, I'm going to learn how to code. And then you just shot off like a rocket. You started accumulating all these certs. You got your ITSM, you got your HR, your CAD, and you're doing very well for yourself. So thank you for joining us. And please share your journey with everybody.
Thanks, Alex. Thank you all for having me. Hi, my name is Jill Sylvester. I am a ServiceNow engineer and technical consultant at an elite ServiceNow partner. I'm super excited to be able to chat with you guys a little bit today and talk about my experience because, as Alex mentioned, I do not come from a typical technical background, no computer science background, anything along those lines. But I'm now obviously working in ServiceNow in a technical role. So I'll start off by telling you a little bit about me and my journey, and then I'd love to talk about what a day in the life looks like for me and some tips that I learned navigating ServiceNow and breaking into the ecosystem. And then I'm excited to hear and answer your questions. So I actually come from out of college. I went into sales. So I was working in travel and education sales. Was there for about 2.5 years.
Oh, I think we lost your audio. There you are.
Can you hear me?
Yep, I can hear you now.
Sorry, I just got sorry about the audio. So I'm not sure where I got cut off, but I was working in travel and education sales, and then I moved to a ServiceNow partner where I was then working in professional services sales. So I was selling ServiceNow consulting and implementation services. And as I began to learn about ServiceNow, I was like, oh, this thing's actually kind of cool. I want to learn more about it. So a couple summers ago, it was summer of 2020. I had way too much time on my hands, as did most of us during quarantine. The ServiceNow Fundamentals course was free, similar to how it is right now for the next couple of days, the
Yep.
remainder of October. And so I took ServiceNow Fundamentals on demand. I got a PDI, a personal developer instance, on the ServiceNow developer site. And I was like, oh, I do actually really, really enjoy this. I think I do want to go down a more technical path and be in project delivery for ServiceNow. So towards the end of 2020, I actually took some time away from my job. I went and took the CSA exam. I got the CSA and I taught myself JavaScript just through a handful of online resources. And
Nice.
then last April, rejoined at a ServiceNow partner in an associate technical consultant role. So that's a little bit about how I like to joke that I kind of accidentally fell backwards into the ServiceNow ecosystem, having
Yeah.
started in travel and education sales. So really over the course of 3 years, I have gone from being in travel and education sales to ServiceNow consulting sales to an associate technical consultant. And now I'm actually technical leading and architecting ServiceNow HR service delivery engagements. So
Wow.
it's been a
Yeah.
whirlwind. It's been an awesome whirlwind.
So I was going through your LinkedIn portfolio, and it looked like you actually took a LinkedIn class on ServiceNow. And I think aside from, I think you said you got a developer instance, and then I guess this class between that, is that how you kind of got started getting to know like what ServiceNow was all about?
Yes. So working in ServiceNow sales, that was one of the ways that I just got exposed because there was a lot of Now Learning, which is the ServiceNow learning platforms content. So I got exposed there to some of the sales content that they have out there. And then I did, in addition to when I was taking the ServiceNow fundamentals class, that's when I also did the LinkedIn intro to ServiceNow one because I wanted to just be a sponge and I was kind of like any sort of more information I can learn about ServiceNow, the better, and I want to learn it. So I took advantage of that, and also some additional of LinkedIn learning classes. I think I did the business analysis one. So there's a lot of great LinkedIn learning content out there that was ServiceNow specific and also non-ServiceNow specific that I took.
Can you tell us what was it like learning ServiceNow? Coming from a non-tech background, a lot of the apprentices have described it as trying to drink from a fire hose. It's like so much information to touch to try to take down. What was your experience going through the ServiceNow fundamentals?
It was like drinking from a fire hose. I'm not gonna lie, when I first took ServiceNow fundamentals, I was reading it and I was not retaining it. The way that I actually learned best was by playing in the personal developer instance.
Yep,
I think that there's so much to do in ServiceNow, and I love to tell clients that I work with, there's a lot of things you can do in ServiceNow, doesn't mean you should do it necessarily. And so playing in the personal developer instance is how I really got a hang of what are the things I can do. Oh, I did this thing. That kind of came out weird. Maybe shouldn't actually configure it that way. And that was honestly the best way that I learned. And it made the concepts that I was reading in ServiceNow fundamentals in the course actually make a lot of sense, and it made the content stick a lot easier. So I completely empathize with everyone going through it for the first time, because it was, even though I had come from ServiceNow sales, it was still pretty foreign to me to actually get in there and start playing around with the platform. But I would just say that the best thing you can do is just start playing hands on with it, and then just see what you can do and see what you can make in there.
absolutely. And so I think you mentioned that you started with a company, maybe not as like a developer, but you started with a Choreo. And I think that's the first, that was the first company you worked with having to do with ServiceNow. How did you get into that company?
Networking. So, a friend of a friend actually had been working there at the time, and I, at the time, was still looking to stay in sales. So I asked to get put in touch with my friend's friend who did work there at the time, because I wanted to go into something. I wanted to go into a more technical vertical in a more technical industry, and that's how I ended up finding my way to Aquario and into ServiceNow, was through networking, and a referral into there. So networking, the ServiceNow ecosystem is very, very small. So definitely would recommend and encourage as much networking as anyone possibly can do, because that's how I found my way into it.
When you talk about networking, I'm assuming there's events you're going to. You're probably reaching out to people that work at certain companies, trying to get to know like what the ecosystem is like that specific company. Is that what you mean by networking?
Yes. So that's something where with my alma mater, I went to the University of Massachusetts Amherst. I've taken advantage of in-person networking events, mostly pre-COVID and pre-pandemic, but then LinkedIn has been huge. Sending, and this is a big skill that I got from working in sales, sending a personalized message to someone, just letting them know, hey, my name's so and so. I see you work at this organization. I'm looking to learn more about ServiceNow, would love to connect. That level of personalization really goes a long way, and definitely takes a lot of courage to be able to do, but it can really, really pay off and reap a lot of benefits. So, in person events, but more so just engaging with people through the beauty of social media.
Yep. And so you're in Choreo, you're working, and you just got your CSA degree, and there's just so many
Mhm.
certificates you can get. I believe you mentioned that you would recommend maybe going into the ITSM, getting that cert next. I'm just curious, how did you decide, like, kind of like which direction to go as far as those
Mm.
first paces?
Great question, because the beauty of ServiceNow is that it's choose your own adventure, which also can be a little bit overwhelming with all the different certifications that are out there, and with how much the platform has grown over the past few years. There's so many areas of the platform that you can learn about and specialize in. For me, I went for ITSM, so IT service management first, because in a lot of ways it is the bread and butter of ServiceNow. It's ServiceNow's first product. It is what really got ServiceNow off the ground. And so for me, it made a lot of sense to pursue ITSM first. Most ServiceNow customers that are out there are going to have ITSM, especially if they have other parts of the platform like customer service management or security operations. They're going to have ITSM also. So I think it's a great part of the platform to start with first, because one, there's going to be a lot of job opportunities in it if most clients have ITSM. But two, with it being the foundation, the bread and butter of ServiceNow, I think it's a great place to start out in. But then after that is where the fun really begins, and you really get to pick, okay, what else do I want to dabble
Yeah.
in? I personally pursued the HR service delivery path, and a big reason was because I loved selling HR service delivery projects. For me, I'm a people person. I love to talk. I love that HR and HRSD is a very people focused part of the platform. And I love being able to work with HR professionals. So that's one of the reasons why I pursued HR. And the next area I'm actually looking to get more into is customer service management, because similar to HR, it's a very people focused part of the software. It's a very people focused process. So that's how I found my way down that route. I also have gotten, as you mentioned, the certified application developer certification.
Yeah.
I worked a little bit with custom applications in ServiceNow, but that was a great certification to get about a year and a half into my ServiceNow developer journey, because it really was a great umbrella that pieced together a lot of the architecture behind ServiceNow in my eyes. So I'm glad that I didn't necessarily start off with that certification. I'm glad I got that one down the road and got some more experience in the platform under my belt beforehand. But on the flip side, if you're someone who is super, super into the technical part of
Mhm.
ServiceNow, where maybe you want to go down an IT operations management route, that is definitely a possibility. For me, I just love working with HR. I love working with people. I personally don't care about servers. So that's why I went down the HR path. But I have a handful of colleagues and former colleagues and friends who have gone down different areas of the platform just because of their own personal interests. But also not just personal interests, professional interests too. As I mentioned, I taught myself JavaScript. I am not the strongest scripter or coder on the face of the planet. I have friends and colleagues who want to go down some of those much, much, much more technical paths. And don't get me wrong, you can find super, super technical areas within customer service management and HR service delivery. I do have to script in my day to day job, which I do love, but I'm definitely not the strongest of my organization and of my colleagues. But if you wanted to go down a custom application developer path, there's going to be a lot of heavy scripting in that. So that's also what's kind of cool about ServiceNow is that ServiceNow is really trying to make a lot of the platform be low and no code, but there's also still so much opportunity to be able to code and to be able to script in the software. So I love that I kind of get to choose how much of it I want to do. And I also have colleagues who are like, I'm not touching that, I'm not scripting. And I have other ones who are like, I want to script everything. So there are a few different factors that kind of come into play when it comes to determining what is going to be the best path for you to specialize in ServiceNow.
Yep. So those who are definitely shying away from ServiceNow, thinking, "Oh, this is low code. I'm not going to be able to exercise my JavaScript skills." There's definitely areas like Jill just said. I think it's the CAD area where you can
Mhm.
definitely do some scripting, some coding. So definitely want to give ServiceNow a second look. I think
Mhm.
you mentioned about your typical day. What does a typical day look like for you? Are you doing a lot of? Are you hands on the keyboard, or do you see it as like 50-50? What does it look like for you?
This is a very cliche answer, but no 2 days are the same, which
Sure.
is part of the reason why I love this job. But the consistent parts are I typically have a daily scrum either internally with my project team or I have it with my project team and with the client project team. So daily scrums, daily stand ups, that's typical day to day activities. Various additional meetings, whether that be with the client, such as backlog refinement, sprint planning, requirements gathering sessions, actually doing demos and showbacks of the work that we built. And then also some internal meetings. So alignment calls, status calls, working sessions with some of my other colleagues if we're on the same project or in the same practice area. So that's kind of the meeting part of my job. But then aside from that, it's a lot of hands on keyboard. So I am actually in there configuring the various stories that we do have of the requirements to build out for the client. Also, with the role that I've moved into, I am actually architecting some of the technical approaches and solutions. So I'm kind of just examining, okay, here's the overall project that we're doing. Architecturally, what's going to make the best or the most sense and the best way to configure this in order to get the client the most value out of what they're looking to do in ServiceNow. So Sometimes that's playing in my PDI. Sometimes that's researching and going through ServiceNow product documentation on my own. Sometimes it's just from my own experience. I have a gut instinct and a best idea of how to go about it. So that kind of sums up a lot of what my job is. So it's internal, external meetings, it's actual hands on keyboard, and then it's actually designing how we're going to go ahead and build this and then delegating it to the rest of the development team.
Thanks, Thanks, Jill. We'd like to open it up to questions from the crowd. We do have one here from one of our apprentices, Essence Brown. So Essence asks, what was your interview process like? I believe at a Choreo, maybe if you can go into, I believe you're working at Cask now, if you go into those two different scenarios.
Sure. So interview process, um, for me, so I am in consulting. So soft skills and people skills are a huge part of my job. So my interview process has consisted of more soft skill related interviews. So situational, how would you react in this situation? Tell us about an experience you've had. Tell us about a time you did this. But then I have also had technical interviews. So before I had solid ServiceNow experience, when I was applying for my associate technical consultant position, I had to just put together a demo of some JavaScript. So that was one of the technical interviews that I had. Once I had ServiceNow experience under my belt, I've had technical interviews that range from I was given some sample stories that I had to build out in my personal developer instance. I had just some situational questions of, okay, here's this requirement that you have for a client. How would you go about configuring it? And I just had to verbalize it. Similarly, I had to talk through what is the difference between this thing and the platform and another thing? What is the difference between client-side scripting and server-side scripting? What's the difference between a business rule and a client script? So just talking through some of those things. And then also just some culture fit interviews. Something that I have found with my consultancies that I've worked with and also ones I've interviewed with is that culture is so important, which is super important to me. So I want to make sure that the organization is a good fit for me and that I'm a good fit for them. So the combination of those three types of interviews, very soft and people skill focused, technical skill focused, and then also cultural focused.
Can you tell us a little bit about the culture there at Cask where you're working right now? Like, do you work, I'm assuming you work remote, and maybe you could tell us a little bit more about what it's like working at Cask.
Yeah, so I work remote, and that is something that is definitely very common in the ServiceNow ecosystem is remote work. There currently are more jobs than there are people to fill them. So I feel very fortunate to be in high demand and kind of get to be picky with where I have gone and the work that I want to do. But remote work is great, flexible work is great. I haven't had to travel because mostly due to the pandemic, and a lot of clients are realizing they can save money by not having consultants actually fly and visit them. So I work remote and I absolutely love it.
This is another question. This is Essence, a follow-up question. So did you have an assessment of any kind, or was it just like your typical interview? Like, did they actually have you open up an instance and have you and just, ask you questions like, how do you do this? How do you, I mean, how exactly, how did that go, the interview process for a ServiceNow position?
Sure. So for only one of my interviews for the technical, I actually was given stories ahead of time that I had to build out in my personal developer instance. And then I got to demo them to the interviewer. The other ones were just verbal. So it was on the spot. What are all the different HR task types? What are the different HR centers of excellence? And I just had to answer it off the top of my head. So I would say that type of interview is more common for technical interviews, is verbally articulating my knowledge within ServiceNow. But I did have one where I actually had to go into the personal developer instance. But for my associate technical consultant interview, when I first got into this role a year and a half ago, when I didn't have ServiceNow technical experience, I just ahead of time I wrote a set of functions in JavaScript for a March Madness simulator of who is going to win March Madness, which for those of you who don't know is the college basketball tournament, because my interview was in March.
Yeah.
So I just did that, and then I took screenshots and put it into a PowerPoint and talked about here were the things that went well, here were the things that I ran into and struggled with when I was configuring this. And the main thing they wanted to see was that I could think technically and think very analytically. That was the most important. It wasn't even necessarily what I built out. And that's also what I found in my actual ServiceNow specific interviews. It was less so what my answer was, and it was more so how I was getting to that answer and why I was getting to that answer is what I feel that people are looking out for or looking for the most.
Makes sense. I have another question. This is just
Mhm.
from one of our pre-apprentices. This is from Edward Appersil. What are the most important things to consider when preparing for a technical interview?
Ooh, that's a great question. I would say, especially for you all, since you are going to be coming into the ServiceNow ecosystem with not having a very extensive ServiceNow background, I would say a lot of the stuff that you're learning in the fundamentals. So, how do you create a new record? How do you save a record? How do you insert and stay on a record? How do you move an incident along throughout the life cycle from work in progress to resolve to closed? I would say just make sure you're feeling well versed in the typical ServiceNow fundamental functionality. Another thing I would say too is if you don't know the answer, just say you don't know it.
Yeah.
That is a thing that I'm a huge preparer. I'm a huge planner. Don't like the unknown, but that's been a huge skill that even working with clients I've had to develop is I'm not sure off the top of my head. I want to make sure I get you the right answer. Let me look into that. Which in an interview, you can't necessarily say that because you can't get back to them. But just owning up when you don't know something, I think that's a really important skill to have. And it's a very humble skill to have. So just also accepting that you're not going to know everything going into the technical interview, and that's okay.
And so it seems like the best way, obviously, with any technology, to getting comfortable with it is to just use it to do something, build something with it.
Mhm.
And I want to give a shout out to one of our pre-apprentices. Her name is Anna. She goes by Crash Kitty in our Discord. That's Anna Davis. She has 3 projects that I believe she's working on. Creating ServiceNow solutions for 3 separate businesses. So you definitely want to
Cool.
reach out to her in Discord and definitely want to start working with her to get that on your resume. And the next question happens to be from Anna Crash Kitty Davis. Anna
Mhm.
Davis asks, what ServiceNow product documentation helps you the most?
There are two places that I go to most frequently, and one is docs.servicenow.com, docs.servicenow.com. That is all of the official ServiceNow product documentation. So ServiceNow themselves puts that together, and it's almost similar to like white pages on each part of the platform. So that's one of the main resources that I turn to. Another that I turn to, and this is usually via Googling the question or issue that I have, is ServiceNow Community. So, ServiceNow Community is pretty much like a forum where anyone who's in the ServiceNow ecosystem can post questions, answer questions. That's where I find a lot more of some of the niche things I'm trying to figure out. If there's a requirement that I have that is maybe a certain type of script, I might look up how other people have configured it. And people will post their own thoughts in ServiceNow community where I'm not going to find something that niche product documentation because the product documentation is more tailored to out of the box and the baseline ServiceNow functionality. So I really use community for some of the customizations that I have to do. So those are definitely the two biggest that I use. But the overarching one with this is Google. I've also stumbled across some great blogs. I've stumbled across some stuff just on the ServiceNow support website. So not ServiceNow community or ServiceNow product docs, but Google's just been the best thing. And then usually whichever one is the top result, but the main one being docs.servicenow.com and ServiceNow community.
It's got another question. This is from one of our newer pre-apprentices, Marilyn Banuelos. What keeps you motivated? Any advice on or tips for someone starting out and feeling overwhelmed?
Ooh, these are great. This is a great set of questions. So something that keeps me motivated is that, and this is one of the things I love about working in the ServiceNow ecosystem, you are in control of your career.
Mhm.
I love that because I love being in control and I am always thinking about what's next. And I love that being in the ServiceNow world, I really feel in control of the next steps. If I want to learn something new in the platform or take advantage of a new opportunity, I feel that I have the opportunity to do that. So that keeps me motivated is the fact that I can try something new whenever I want. In terms of someone starting out and feeling overwhelmed, I would say it's okay. There is so much to know in ServiceNow. You're never going to know it all. So
Yep.
once you really allow yourself to accept that, it's kind of a sigh of relief knowing that I'm never going to know it all. There's too much to know in ServiceNow where I wouldn't want or ever expect anybody to know it all. So I would just say progress over perfection. So if you can go in and just learn something new one day, that's great. You don't need to go in and be able to do every single thing the first time request a PDI. So I would just say incremental growth is humongous. And once you start learning some things in ServiceNow, more pieces eventually will click so much easier. So it will really snowball. But I would just say baby steps, progress over perfection. Learn something new every time you go in there. Try something new every time you go in there. Something you've already done before, try it again to make sure you reinforce it. Something you've done before, maybe try it another time. I have messed up so many things in ServiceNow where I've had to delete everything I did because I'm like, that didn't work out, but I learned from it. So also take some of your mistakes or things that maybe you didn't perfect the first time, as those are wins and those are learning opportunities. No one's expecting you to be perfect from day one. There's too much to know in ServiceNow to be perfect.
Absolutely. Yeah. So what's next? What's your next cert, or what's your next goal? Maybe your 3-year goal from now. Like, what do you see? Where do you see yourself?
Next certification goal is customer service management. Where I see myself a few years from now is I do want to move proper into a technical architect role. So I love the hands on the keyboard part of my job, but what really excites me and what really challenges me, and going off of that last question, feeling challenged on a day to day basis, healthy amounts of feeling challenged, where my challenges are very doable and it's attainable to actually like conquer them. That's one of the things that keeps me super motivated. So I feel challenged by having to actually architect technical solutions and really critically think about all the puzzle pieces of the platform and how to do it and flex new muscles. So my short to medium term goal is to move into a proper technical architect role.
Nice.
Mhm.
So final question. What kind of advice would you give anybody just getting into the ServiceNow space? In other words, if you were to rewind 2 years from now, anything you would do different than you did, these last 2 years getting into ServiceNow?
I would have done it sooner. That's what I would have done a couple years ago. But I would say the best advice I can give, especially with the position that you're all in coming from a coding boot camp, is network. Put your certifications on your LinkedIn. Put on your LinkedIn that you're learning ServiceNow. Put in your bio the words and the phrase ServiceNow. Reach out to recruiters, whether they be internal recruiters at a consultancy or internal recruiters at a ServiceNow client where they're using ServiceNow internally. If you see somebody with ServiceNow in their bio, shoot them a message and let them know, hey, my name's so and so, like I said before, interested in getting into ServiceNow, saw you work with the platform, would love to connect. Reach out to recruiters that are also at some of the external agencies who are working with multiple companies to be able to place ServiceNow consultants and developers into those positions at clients and at partners. That's the best advice I can give. Networking has been absolutely critical to my career, and it's the best advice that I can pass on to someone else because it's kind of like if I want to go to a restaurant, I'm going to ask my friends, hey, which restaurant do you like downtown? I'm going to go and I'm going to get a referral. And that's how I'm going to figure out where I'm going to go to eat. Occasionally, I'll just go and wing it and try somewhere new. But I think any sort of warm introduction that you can have somewhere is going to really set you up for success in your job hunt. So that's what I'd recommend. And also just have fun with it. I have a lot of fun with my job and working in service now. Try new things out, get a personal developer instance, just play in it and just have a good time. So those are my two biggest pieces of advice. It's just networking and have fun.
And so a mutual friend of ours, Brittany Pham, who I
Mhm.
consider a guru at networking, actually was a guest speaker, I think, last month. And so for the
Mhm.
pre-apprentices who probably didn't get a chance to see Brittany Pham go over networking with us, we'll ask and see if Mike could get you guys access to that video, because she goes over everything from A to Z about what the how to get your network started, how to manage it, how to grow it using LinkedIn. And so definitely want you to get you guys access to that. We did have one more question from one of our, is it okay if we get one more before we
Sure.
go? So this is
Great.
from Ron. This is one of our apprentices. Are you in control of the pace of your projects, or is the client controlling the pace?
Both, and also neither. um, Typically, the way that the project life cycle works is when the sales process is going on, a timeline based on the scope of the work that needs to be done is identified. Sometimes it ends up happening quicker than that. Sometimes it ends up going longer than that. Sometimes it is right around that time that's defined. But I would say, especially in the role that I'm in, with being on the more technical side and also now moving into this technical lead role, I get to be in control of like what stories are being built. So what stories are being built, when they're being built, and I have some control over the timeline in that sense. But typically, for the most part, going into a project, the timeline is relatively set out. And for the most part, it's actually the project manager or the engagement manager who's in charge of that timeline. But then clients are also in charge of it because they have their own internal timelines that need to be hit. They sometimes want a lot more stuff than we initially planned for. So a new contract gets signed, project gets extended. So no two projects are the same in that sense, but I'd say everyone has some control over the timeline of the project.
Nice. Thank you so much, Jill. I promised I'd get you out of here by 3:30. 3:31, so we went over just a little over. But thank you so much for spending time with us. Best way to get a hold of Jill would be maybe through your LinkedIn. Any questions, follow-up questions they might have?
Yes, my LinkedIn, I think I'm under there as Jillian Sylvester. Jillian's my full first name. So message me on LinkedIn, send me a request, and would love to be able to chat. And I've had so many people help me in my career, so would love to be able to help everyone else out here too.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Jill. And for everybody watching, be sure to watch for next Friday when we have another guest speaker. Everybody have a great weekend. And thank you, Jill. Thank you so much.
Thank you all. Thank you,
Bye.
Alex. Have a great
Okay.
weekend.
You too. Bye, everybody.
Bye.